I was out briefly to water and I got bit like crazy. I was like, I don't know whether I just attract them or if it's just me.
Well, I have to confess, I do have a citronella candle going right now, probably preventing. But there's also a little bit of a breeze, so it's keeping them away.
Good. Yeah.
So are mosquitoes out yet?
Hi, John. Hi, Adrian.
Hi.
Okay, we're at 7 o'clock and we have a quorum, so we can start. So we'll call the meeting to order at 7 o'clock. Are there any changes to the agenda? Do we approve the agenda as it is? Do we need to make any changes? Hearing nothing. I need a motion to approve the minutes from June 3rd, please.
So moved.
Okay, George, a second.
Yes.
Adrian will second. Thank you.
Oh.
Is there any discussion? Any changes? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes of June 3rd, please say aye.
Aye.
Raise your hands, thumbs up. Okay, I see. Anyone opposed? Seeing no nays, we are unanimous, so we don't have to do a roll call. That's wonderful. And I understand that we have some public input. Is that correct?
So Tammy, I'm waiting on public input from one of our students, Reese Eldert Moore, who's supposed to be calling in with us. I do not have her on here yet, so I'm not sure how you'd like to handle when I see her pop up, if you'd like me to get your attention and maybe take it from there, or whatever your pleasure is.
Sure. Why don't we move? Yeah. Why don't we move on to hearing from our principals, and then we can bounce back to hear from her when she joins us. Okay.
Very good.
Does that work for everybody? Okay. So who wants to go first? Fred, I see your smiling face over there in the corner of my screen. Why don't you go first?
I want to go first, yes. We ended the year, surprisingly enough, with a lot of excitement and enthusiasm. Everybody was tired. There's no doubt about that. They worked pretty hard to, be creative these last 3 months and deliver in multiple ways to the families. But they're excited about what might next year look like. A little trepidation there. We're prepared for whatever comes, but there's a lot of details to work out when we finally land on what that last model will be. And I think we're going to benefit. We learned a lot from the surveys. We're going to benefit by having a universal model that's adaptable, but that the families can kind of accommodate the model rather than multiple plans that we had in the school accommodating multiple requests from families. I think we're ready. We'll go with a common platform, obviously, and do some upfront education for the families. We definitely do not want to lose the opportunity that we have now with families as our partners. They've developed. I think they would feel left out if we didn't involve them like they're being involved now. So we're talking about that at our meetings, and how can we continue that partnership with home. I want to publicly thank all of our educators, support staff, teachers. They all did a phenomenal job trying to address all issues and concerns and whatnot that came across their table. So if you have any questions, I can answer them, but that's pretty much all I have to say.
Does anyone have any questions for Fred? Okay. And then Jody, yes.
So I'm happy to tell you about Shrewsbury, but Reese just sent me a message that she is on and can hear us.
Oh, okay.
So sorry to jump the gun over, but so Reese, if you can hear me, just go ahead and try talking.
Jody, is she signed up on the link to the YouTube or on the link to our meeting?
So I know that Dave sent her a message specifically about how she can connect. And I'm not quite sure. So how about I do my quick principal talk, and then if you don't mind my rudeness, I will see if I can get her connected.
Sure, that would be perfect. Fine.
Yeah,
Thank you, Jody.
Jody, if I could just ask, yeah, Reese is still not showing up on our people who are in this meeting. So if you can at all coach her through that, that would be fantastic.
Great. So for Shrewsbury, like Fred, we ended the year with high spirits and tired brains. We had a contactless 6th grade graduation where we put down a red carpet and had the kids walk the red carpet out front over to a bin to pick up their graduation materials while we stayed far away from them, but hollered and waved a little bit. Our pre-K graduation happened on Zoom, and that was as adorable as you can imagine. Many 3 and 4-year-olds all on a Zoom call together, very excited. We were lucky in the last month to get a second grant from the Agency of Agriculture called the Infrastructure Grant, which will allow us to have $1,000 towards putting together a mobile cooking cart for our classrooms. So that is going to be really exciting. I want to thank Gary. He's been working really hard with our staff and with our partner Sage to design the redesign of the garden that part of our other Agency of Agriculture grant will go towards. So over the summer, we're going to have the beginnings of a total garden revamp that will be all grant funded for now, but will really give the kids another amazing outdoor classroom, which might come in really handy if we're social distancing. So we are anticipating that and excited about that. And then, yeah, just kids are going into the summer, getting ready to take a breath, get a little bit of sunshine, and then participate in some of the optional asynchronous workshops that our district has designed for them over the summer on a variety of topics. And so that was a high note.
Excellent. And we'll let you try and get Reese connected so that she can speak. And we'll move on to Helen. Helen, first of all, I have to tell you that video that you sent was wonderful. Absolutely great. Congratulations.
That is mostly my report, because I think that reflects not only how we ended the school year, but for the 3 months that they worked hard to develop platforms and systems that were going to work for families and for students. And it was pretty amazing what they were able to do, and they're pretty excited about their accomplishments. So really hats off to them. They did a great job. They're tired for sure, and they're ready for a nice break, and I'm glad they're going to get it. We had a wonderful virtual 6th grade celebration. The educators all created acrostic poems for each one of the 6th graders that were being promoted, and they were very pleased with that. And everybody was on a Google Meets meeting, and we had some music and lots of great things. So it was a great ending.
Excellent, excellent. And I just want to, on behalf of, well, we have you, I don't know if you want to stay with us all meeting or not, since you're outdoors, but we want to congratulate you on your retirement and leaving, and I hope that you're on to wonderful adventures. And on behalf of the board, and everyone can join me, we'd like to give you a round of applause and thank you for everything you've done, particularly the last few months. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Tyler, tell us what is going on at Mill River.
Well, despite everything that was thrown at us this year for all the buildings, I think we had a very positive end to the year. Our graduation celebration, as we discussed earlier, went really well. I think the video was produced by Brian Farnham in a fantastic way. It really did come off very well. Our diploma distribution, Miss McLemore and I, or Jen McLemore and I, got to see all of our graduates, all but really, believe it or not, all but 4 of our graduates came and picked up their diplomas. And it was really great to see them and be able to celebrate them in that regard. And, it was really great to see their families and everyone followed the rules. Everyone did exactly what they had to do, stayed in their cars, but they were just so happy to, have that moment with their kids and have that, that moment. I think it went really well. And you know, I talked about this in our leadership team meeting on Monday about the last 3 days we had last week for professional development with our teachers. And I think maybe Andrew might talk about this here in a little bit, but our teachers were so gung-ho with jumping in on the work that needs to be done for next year. I was really amazed at how well they took it and how much they, like I said, they just jumped in. You know, this time of year, we're all fried. And I was really impressed with how they took everything in stride and really everyone was on the same page. So I think we really ended this year really well. And I also want to say congratulations to Jen Malcolmore. I am not the first person to ever really do this very often. I'm not the most outward congratulatory person, but you know, she just completed her first year as the assistant principal, and she did a great job. You know, she was throwing a ton, and she really did well. So I really do appreciate all of her efforts.
Yes, we do too. Thank you, Jen. Do we have Reese with us now, Jody?
Tammy, I think Doug Earl joined us by phone.
Oh, okay.
Doug, is that,
I saw someone join. Yeah, is that you, Doug?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're still waiting on Reese.
Sorry,
Jody,
I thought that was Reese. I will keep trying.
Okay, that's what I thought too when I saw it pop up. That's why I asked. Okay. Is there anything else? I know Maureen gave us a written report. So I think we're done with principal statements. So Stan, we have food service vendor bids and selection.
Good evening. You finally got that situated. Yeah, with the food service proposal, with the RFP that we requested, we received 3 proposals. One was from Lexington Independence, which is our current vendor, Cafe Services, and Abbey Group was the other bidder. All 3 bidders were in our school district at one point or another. So people that have been around long enough, we're familiar with, you know, with all 3. The results of our scoring or evaluation of the bids were Lexington received 6 recommendations from the committee, and Cafe Services had 3, and there were no recommendations for Abbey Group. And the overall scoring, Lexington received 854 points from the group. Cafe was at 812, and Abbey Group was 705. And this is basically as far as we went with the evaluation of the proposals. In the past, we were able to maybe visit other school districts where these other vendors might have been at, or we would have had the vendors come to the school and do a physical presentation on site of the stuff that they could offer to our district. So we were kind of limited this year in that. But the recommendation of the committee would be to accept the proposal from Lexington and to, authorize the superintendent and business manager to enter into a contract with Lexington for the upcoming year.
Okay, great. Will someone make that motion, please?
So moved, George.
Thank you, George. Is there a second?
Adrian?
Thank you, Adrian. Is there any discussion on this? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving Lexington Independent as the food service vendor for the coming cycle, please say aye. Thumbs up. Yes. Good. Awesome. Anyone opposed? I see no no's, so we are unanimous. Thank you.
Tammy, I don't know if you want to pause here. I'm told we have Reese. Reese, is that you on the number that ends in 57? Is that you?
Hi, Reese, are you there?
Yes.
Awesome. So we have Reese with us, Tammy, if you'd like to do the public comment now.
Sure. So we'll move back. Reese, we were waiting for you. So we're moving back to public comment. So I understand. Thank you, first of all, very much for your email to everybody. We all read it. I know Dave responded to you, and I knew that he invited you to come and speak to us tonight. So I will let you speak.
So hello, my name is Reese Eldert Moore. I'm a rising senior, and I'm glad that you all received my letter. And with everything going on right now, I felt it was appropriate to take action on it. So let me know if you have any questions about it, and I'll do my best to answer.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions on Reese's email for her? I thought it was very well done, Reese, and thank you so much for it. I know it must have taken a lot of time to put it together, and I appreciate it. And I hope that you will, after you leave us from the call, if you will participate by listening to when we have the discussion of the equity plan, because I think that would be very important. And we would definitely welcome any comments or suggestions you have afterwards. If you could drop us another email, and that would be much appreciated. Does anyone else have any? Does anyone have any questions for Reese? I don't see that anyone does. So please make sure that you listen in. Do you have anything else you want to add, Reese?
Yes, I was wondering if you were going to vote on my request.
We're going to discuss the equity plan later on in the meeting, and we'll be discussing it then.
Okay. Thank
All right.
you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Reese.
All right.
Okay. There is anyone else, Anne, for public input? No. Okay. So then we will move back to number 7. So Stan, I think that's still you, and that's breakfast and lunch meal pricing.
Yep. We're looking for the board to approve the lunch and breakfast pricing for next year. The only pricing increase we have will be for student lunches and adult lunches. We ask that the student lunch rate be set at $3.05, which is a 10-cent increase from last year of $2.95. The adult lunch we ask to be set at $4, which is a 20-cent increase from the $3.80 from the previous year. And the breakfast lunch for students to be $1.75, which would be no increase, and the adult breakfast of $2.50, which would be no increase. All these prices are done through a price equity calculator that is supplied by the USDA, and we are required to meet the minimum requirement of the pricing that the calculator produces. So increasing the pricing really is no option for us. I mean, if we want to avoid the general fund having to make up that difference. So if we were to keep the student pricing at $2.95, that means we would have to kick in 10 cents per student meal next year to cover that difference. So based on those prices, I would ask the board to move on accepting those prices for FY21.
So moved, George.
Thank you, George. Is there a second? Adrian seconding. Thank you. Is there any discussion?
I do have a question.
Sure.
Stan, I know I reviewed all the offers and all that. Is that price increase what the vendors were counting on? I know, they expect to sell a certain number of meals when they price out their offer. Is that 10 cents gonna screw things up?
No, it won't, because it actually helps us because next year will be the first year we'll be using a fixed price per meal from them. Where in the past we were just charged for all their expenses that they incurred actually for food and labor. So the pricing we got in the bids were actually a fixed price per meal. So increasing that price won't hurt them at all in regards to any kind of profit that they may achieve.
No, I was just thinking in terms of how many meals they sell. If it goes up that much, they may not sell as many meals. But you don't think that's an issue?
No. it shouldn't be an issue because they should, they should take into account that there is going to be an increase every year with that, just based
Okay.
on the pricing. Because
Right.
the minimum price that was set for next year was $2.94 plus a cost of a consumer price index increase of 4.94%. So they were all aware of that going into it.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Liz.
I am curious to know if we have plans to communicate this out to the public, maybe before the start of the school year, with the reason being that parents have extra time to fill out free and reduced lunch paperwork, which is extremely lengthy and complicated. Is that something that we could consider?
Is the question about notifying? I'm sorry, Liz, because I was poorly multitasking. Is the question
no,
is the
that's
question
fine.
about notifying families about the changes in pricing and that type of thing?
Yes, I just, knowing that paperwork, when our children go back to school, we get a lot of paperwork, the free and reduced lunch paperwork. It's very lengthy and it's complicated. And so I'm wondering what folks think about maybe communicating out to the public well in advance, heads up, this is coming down the pike, and maybe say, the forms are available, on the town website or on the school website, so that if folks want to get a leg up on that, knowing it's coming, because I suspect some, well, I don't suspect, I don't know, but people may be out of work because of COVID-19. And so, they may want, it's overwhelming when our kids go back to school and we get all this paperwork. And so to give everybody a heads up, I think would be a good idea.
Absolutely, Liz. We will be doing that. Won't shock you. We're going to have a lot of additional notifications to issue to folks this summer, and that'll be a part of it. Interestingly,
Awesome,
the big guidance from the state that I shared with you folks on health today actually even addresses that, like letting families know way ahead of time about the free reduced piece and where the documentation is, the paperwork. Anticipating that we'll have more influx of those coming in. So that's a great point.
Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor of setting the meal prices $3.05 for student lunches, $4 for adult lunches, $1.75 for student breakfast, and $2.50 for adult breakfast, please say aye. Thumbs up.
Aye.
Okay. Anyone opposed? I see none, so it's unanimous. Thank you. Okay. You need anything else from us, Stan?
Oh, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, and Dave, we'll move into now the equity plan discussion.
Yes, and momentarily I'm going to turn that over to Jody. Jody's going to take the lead on that conversation for us.
Great.
And sorry, give me 1 second. I have to get back onto the equity plan since I had other tabs open to try to help restyle in. So I can just start with the contextualization. So as we planned out some work around increasing equitable practice in our district throughout this year, part of our conversation was about the importance of making sure that we are creating long-term solutions to disrupting inequity that really build a strong base of understanding and support for this work. And so we decided that it was really important to start to look at a long-term plan in the same way that we would any other major district initiative. So when we want to create long-term change, we don't just say, okay, this year we're going to do all these things. We say, what are we going to be doing for the next multiple years, regardless of who is doing that work? This is, as a district, what our plan is. And so Andrew and Dave and I started working on this around January, and we had it teed up to go to the LT, to the equity committee, and then over to you guys to take a look at in March. And then we got temporarily waylaid, but I am very happy that we are working on it again right now. So if you look at this Mill River 4-year equity plan, 2019 to 2020 is our current year. There were some more things that we had planned for spring that did not happen, but we're committed to picking that work back up right now. And so we've broken this plan into a few different buckets of work that need to happen. The first one is around educator professional development. So we know that helping our educators to have a wide lens of understanding is really important in this work. And so, for example, next year, we are taking 3 of our early release days, and we don't have many. We really do think this is one of the most important pieces of work that we're doing. One of those days we'll be working on an overlay tool to help teachers look at curriculum to make sure that the curriculum is coming from a really representative lens. And the other 2 will be external expert-led trainings done by people who identify as a part of a historically marginalized population, because we know doing equity work, it's always better to have those that identify as historically marginalized being the speakers, because the majority viewpoint is just not necessarily, we don't understand as much. We're offering an optional after-school PD series. So the Equity Committee is hoping to write a grant to provide an optional PD series on equity literacy. But if we are unable to secure funding, then I will run a restorative practice supported plan, because I'm comfortable and trained in doing that. And so we'll do one or the other depending on what we have for funding and where the interest is. We are currently running a variety of optional summer 10-hour workshops where our teachers can get relicensing credit. And one of those is around examining, addressing, and analyzing educational inequities. And I know that we've had a good amount of educators sign up for that in their free time this summer, even though it's not paid. And then if you look year 2, 3, and 4, it just builds upon that work, because again, we want to not have one and done type situations. We want to continue to build capacity in this area, and we want sustained change. The second place that we're looking is at curriculum and content. So curriculum is like the how and the skills and the overarching proficiencies of what we teach. The content is the specific things like, what are we teaching in history class? Which books are we picking? And so we wanted to look at both of those things. So Rutland City, Maddie Aiken, who's a Mill River parent, had a curriculum overlay tool that she was working on to help teachers really just look at their curriculum from a lens of addressing inequity. And we used that template and changed it a little bit just to better fit where we are as a district. So we'll be training all staff on that next year with support from coaches and the leadership team. We're going to start working on support for teachers for integration of increased representation in their content. And we will use coaches and leadership team and the training that we're doing with our educators to continue to push for better representation. Another key piece of our equity plan is systems and structures. So this year, thank you for the adoption of the board equity policy. To me, that's such important work because it provides the support for me and for Dave and for the rest of the LT in doing this work. It says that this work is important to you guys. And so I feel empowered to do things like bring this entire plan forward to you. In the next year, the leadership team is going to be completing more implicit bias training. We already have implicit bias training for all staff as a part of our Safe Schools training, but that's really very small amount of training. And so we want to go much more in depth. We're going to be looking at our handbooks and looking at our handbooks from an equity lens, making sure that we don't have systems that disproportionately negatively affect those from historically marginalized populations. And one thing that we are committing to doing this year is to identify and disseminate an equity-focused survey to all staff so we can get some internal baseline data of where staff currently is in their understanding of issues of inequities, and so that we can use that to plan the professional development and the supports that would be most useful. I don't know those of you that might be involved ever with the NEA, the union has some really great materials around inequities. And so they were interested in potentially helping us to identify a survey. And so it's great to have that collaboration and that commitment from their members as well. And again, we go on to year 2, 3, and 4, but I'm really focusing on next year because that's what you'll see over the summer and when we return to school, to build on all of that work, because once again, just addressing these issues in all areas and then building upon that work in a sustained way over time is how we create lasting change. Under representation, we have library audits and ordering goals. In the hopes that we have some budget to purchase something next year, we'll see. We really want to start to look at when our kiddos look around their classrooms, their libraries, their hallways, what does it look like? And do our materials represent our country and our world? And does every single one of our students at Mill River feel represented in our schools? Because that's a part of feeling welcome and safe. And then from the student eye view, we really know that sustained change happens when we support kiddos, because they are the powerhouses of all that we do. And so this year we revisioned and restarted our GSA. Next year, we want to continue our collaboration with Getting to the Why, which is a group of students that are really looking at issues of inequities and then trying to think about actions. And with GSA, and then we talked about working to identify potential speakers and grant funding for those speakers to address students directly. And then moving on from there from a year-by-year basis. So I am very happy to take any questions, wonders, anything that you've got for me.
I just want to, before anyone asks any questions or any discussion, I just want to remind everybody, if you're not speaking, to just make sure you're muted, because we're getting some feedback and that's not going to be good for anyone who's watching us either. And this is an important discussion, so I'd like everybody who's listening in to be able to hear. Okay, so who would like to start the discussion? John. John, there you go.
So, okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, all right. Trying something new with headphones. I wasn't sure if it was going to work. So I really appreciate the equity plan. I know a lot of work went into that. And I'm going to do the same thing that I always do and say that in my mind, it's not going to happen fast enough. We should really be able to make some changes a lot quicker than what we're doing. I don't think it should take a whole lot of energy to walk down the halls and make sure that the pictures and representations of different things throughout the hallways and the classrooms and in the common spaces are more inclusive and diverse. I understand that our library is what it is, but I think we can probably find ways of showcasing some of the books and literature that we do have to make it at least a lot more visible. I think there are a lot of things that could be done a lot sooner than what's happening. I also think that Reese's letter asked 3 main questions about equity in our schools. I think for the most part, the equity plan does speak to the requests that she had in those areas fairly well, although I think her timeline is more aligned with mine, and that some things need to happen a lot quicker. The one thing that we have not discussed and has not been brought up yet is her very first item that she asked, and that was to have the Black Lives Matter flag flown at the schools. I think Dave mentioned that that's something that we are seriously considering doing at least the high school, or would consider at the high school. I think I'm not sure why that's the only school that would be applicable to, but it certainly is quite visible to a lot of people. So I think that's a good start, and I would like to find out what we need to do as a board to get that rolling.
I would think that perhaps a motion of by you to have that discussion and take some action on that, because we do have this marked as something, the equity plan is something that we can act upon during this meeting. So I am, if you'd like to, and then we can hear from administration and maybe put our heads together and come up with something to address her first concern and that issue.
And Tammy, just to throw out there, I know that Reese has a few more words she'd like to share with the board. So maybe this would be the appropriate time for us to do that, because this connects to her requests.
Sure. Reese, are you still with us? And I understand there's something else you'd like to add?
Yes, hello. I wasn't talking about only one of the requests I had. I was talking about all of them, and I was wondering if they would be talked about and or voted upon tonight. And especially the raising the Black Lives Matter flag in all Mill River schools.
I don't know if you were listening, if you were able to listen while you were in queue, but that's what John McKenna was just discussing. So is there anything specifically that wasn't in your email that you wanted to add to that? Because we're going to have a board discussion about that right now.
Implementing restorative justice?
No, well, all of it we're talking about. It's all part of the equity plan that we just went through, that Jody was starting to explain to us. But in particular, with regard to the flag raising, if there's anything, I think that was the topic that John was just most recently discussing. If there's anything that you'd like to add from the student point of view, we'd be happy to hear it right now.
Sorry?
Is there anything that you would like to add with regard to the raising of a Black Lives Matter flag? That was your number one request, and that was what John McKenna was just speaking to in part. So is there anything that you'd like to add from a student perspective before the board discusses that?
Yes, I requested it at all schools, and I'm aware that you guys were just talking about that, but I was kind of curious as to why it wouldn't be raised at all schools.
Well, we don't know yet because we haven't talked about it. So I honestly can't answer your question because we haven't had a board discussion about it yet.
Okay, so thank you.
And with regard to your request, let me just maybe back up a bit and say that with regard to your request that was in your email, you're asking if we're going to vote on all four of those things. And I can't say whether we will. We're discussing the equity plan, and whatever may be raised as motions during that would be possibly acted upon by the board. But the board cannot specifically act on your email because that wasn't warned as part of the meeting. So if that makes sense to you. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Reese. So John, back to you.
So I would like to make a motion that we raise the Black Lives Matter flag at all of our schools in the district.
I second that.
Thank you. Liz, for Ann's purposes. And discussion now.
I do have one comment, and I think it's a wonderful idea, and I'm not arguing against it in any way, shape, or form. I just have a question. Do we fly flags at all schools all summer? Because we don't have staffing in every school every day, and there are rules on how you fly flags.
I was thinking the same question in my mind, Adrian. Gary, are you able to answer that at all?
There we go. Sorry. We do basically keep the flags up for the summer. We do have staff there, and when we get certain directives from the state about flying them at half-mast or whatever for whatever reasons, we do have staff that can accommodate that.
Okay. And Andy, did you have something to add?
Yes, I'm supporting of raising the Black Lives Matter flag. But if we do that, I would like to ask we raise an LGBTQ flag. Also, let's be fully inclusive here.
Okay. Doug.
Yeah, I'm going to be probably on the odd side of the situation here. I don't agree with the Black Lives Matter. Everybody's life matters. My standpoint is purely political situation from Black Lives Matter. There's a few things that are not what I think should be there when it comes to their bylaws and their beliefs and stuff. So I will be voting no for both of those.
Okay. Anyone else? George.
Can you hang on? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, I tend to agree with Doug a tiny bit from the standpoint of I understand they're concerned Black lives do matter. Well, so do Latino lives, and they end up sometimes in the same predicament some of the folks of the Black folks end up in. So I think Doug's on the right track in saying that we need to have a flag that encompasses everybody. And I don't know how you'd go about doing that, but you know, yes, maybe we ought to single out one group and work on that, but then what about the groups that are being left out? That's my question.
Okay. Dave, you have something to add.
Yeah, and it's not an opinion, but it's just some context. Reese had a question. It was a good question. Why would we only recommend raising the flag at the one school, Mill River? The simple answer for the reason why I responded to Reese that way is Tyler is the only principal that I had spoken with about this topic. So I was very comfortable saying how Tyler and I felt about that, but was not a conversation I'd had with other principals about flagpoles there. Second comment for the group, just as we look at some of the schools that have done this across the state and across the country, I've seen some places raise the flags with certain parameters, if you will. Like as an example, Rutland did it for a certain number of days. I'm not advocating for one approach or another, but I do think it's worth thinking about what are the parameters with which you do take an action along these lines. That's all I have for you.
Could I also say something?
Sure.
I was wondering whether, I mean, I support flying the flag. I don't have a problem with it not, necessarily including everyone. The American flag, the U.S. flag represents everyone. At least I hope it does. But I do wonder whether the timing would be good if we did that in the first week of school to set the tone, certainly at the high school. I don't know if it's necessary at the elementary schools because I don't know how much of an issue it is. But it certainly would support the parents that are coming in and out of the elementary schools. But I think to just fly it without any conversation and without making a deal out of it, I think we're missing an opportunity to have the conversation at the school level and at the town level. If we make it a more formal process at the beginning of school. I'm just putting that out there.
John.
Yeah, my motion was just to do it, but it had nothing to do with when. I agree with Adrian that I think it needs to be done right, and I think the beginning of school is an excellent time to do it. We could get into a very lengthy debate about why All Lives Matter is not a good response to Black Lives Matter, but we don't need to do that here. It would take far too long. And I understand George's point that it doesn't include everybody, but it's a place to start. I definitely agree with Andy that we should have a pride flag of some form to go along with that. I don't know that there exists anything specific to the Latinx population, but I think Black Lives Matter to a certain extent does include all folks of color. And I think it's appropriate to do that as well as the pride flag.
Okay. Liz.
I just want to add at this time that I think this conversation is demonstrative of the problems that we're experiencing as a nation in this moment. Nobody is saying all lives don't matter, but given the history of the United States and the inequities that have been in place since people landed on this soil and took from an indigenous population, I think, there's just so much work to be done. And I think this conversation represents how far we are and how far we need to go. So I would like to go back to John's motion about raising the Black Lives Matter flag. I seconded that, and I'd like to move forward with that vote. And then maybe Andy could make a second motion.
Okay, is there any other discussion?
And just to go back to one point about, the American flag, Adrian, I think this was your point, or maybe Tammy, about the American flag, it represents all lives, we hope, until there is liberty and justice for all, right? So that's an ideal we have not yet attained as a nation, right? And we want to attain that, right? We're working towards that. We are committed to that. And I think it timely, and I think it important that we raise the Black Lives Matter flag at every school. And that's all I wish to say at this time.
Okay, does anybody else want to weigh in? Okay, hearing none. So John, your motion is just that we raise the flag and then we can discuss the time and the parameters. Is that what I was getting at?
Yes, but I would like to make sure that we get that established in this meeting as well to go along with the motion.
Okay. Do we want to just address the raising of the flag first, and then depending upon how that motion is addressed, then we can discuss if it's past timing? Okay, I see lots of nods. Okay, George, did you have a question?
A suggestion, I would suggest we do a roll call vote.
I was going to do that because Doug indicated, and you also indicated that you might be voting different from other people. So I will go through alphabetically, folks. So Adrian, you're first. All those in favor of approving John's motion to raise a Black Lives Matter flag at all schools in the district? So Adrian.
Okay, I support that motion.
Thank you. Amy.
I support that motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Andy.
Yes.
Thank you. BJ is not with us, correct? Yeah, okay. Doug?
No.
Okay. George?
Abstain.
Okay. John?
Yes.
Len? You're muted. Thumbs up. Yes. Len is a yes. Liz?
Yes, thank you.
Maria?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And I'm yes. All right. So it appears that we have passed that motion. And now do we want to make a motion or have a discussion, and then we can make a motion, however we would like to do it, about the timing of those flags being raised?
If you want, I'll make a motion, Tammy.
Great, that would be good. Thank you.
I make a motion that we have a formal flying of the Black Lives Matter flags in all of our schools in the first week of school.
Is there a
I will
second
second
to that
that.
motion? Great, John. Thank you. Discussion on that topic then, timing wise. Does anyone have any input? Hearing none.
I have
Maria, yes.
Oh, just for sake of discussion, I'm wondering what kind of who's going to be held to organizing how that's going to take place, and what kind of education is going to happen around it.
The logistics of it. Jody, would you like to speak to that possibly?
Sure, I'd love to. I will say that, I am excited about this. As one of the equity coordinators for the district, I would be happy to collaborate with others on doing so. I would love it if there would be a couple board members, since it was your decision, that would be part of that collaboration. And I don't know whether that means an ad hoc committee, or you could request the equity committee. It might be easier. The equity committee is so large and away for the summer. It might be easier just to have a couple board members. I'm happy to volunteer, and I would advocate that we do ask Reese if she would like to be involved. It seems.
Absolutely. I think student involvement would be key to that. Absolutely. And so is everyone supportive of Jody's suggestion to get a small group together to coordinate that? We could do that by consensus. And anyone who's interested, can you please, I see everyone giving the thumbs up, can you email Jody and let her know that you'd be interested in participating in that? All right. Thank you all.
I'm sorry, I lost connection during all of what Maria said.
Oh. Maria, do you want to read this?
I'm trying to kick my kids off of the internet, so maybe I don't lose the connection again.
John, Maria made a motion that you are in charge of everything, and we are waiting for your report.
That wouldn't be the first time that's happened to me.
Who would be responsible for organizing the education part around raising the flag? And Jody volunteered to work on that group and invited several board members interested to be part of that, and we'd like Reese to be part of that too if she would be willing.
So
I would definitely be interested in participating in that, obviously, as well.
And that's what we had said, that anyone who is interested from the board to just reach out to Jody, and she has volunteered to kind of spearhead that coordination. So if you do that, and we just did that by consensus, and then this way everyone is involved to the extent that they want to be or need to be. Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you.
I had some comment on the equity plan itself, which I thought on the systems and structures, Jody, where you had that the leadership team is going to do implicit bias training. I was wondering if the board could be invited to that, and or could that presentation training be recorded somehow if the board can't be present, and we could have our own training, because I think it's really important that the board be trained in what the leadership team is being trained in, and all the different training that's available. I think that would be important for us to participate in as well.
Absolutely. So it's part of, as you know, your policy that you guys do some training in regard to inequities every single year. And so I think it makes perfect sense if we are doing bias training at the same time. And it can only strengthen an organization when we're all building that capacity together, especially as decision makers. So I know that there's at least 2 other neighboring districts who are also focusing on implicit bias training for their boards or leadership teams in the next year. And I'm hoping to collaborate with them. We'll get it figured out and definitely offer it up to the board. Something that Maria asked at our last equity committee meeting was, we are offering a 10-hour workshop on examining educational inequities for this summer. And it is asynchronous, which means that you can have the materials and look at it whenever you want to. And so I'd like to also offer that to any board member that wants to look at that. You are more than welcome. Just let me know and I will send you that over. Again, just with the caveat that it is organized by myself as a white person, and I am not a leader in equity, but I am part of the district, and so I can do that for free. And right now we're in the middle of a budget crisis, and so we're just providing every single thing that we can with the limitations that we do have. And if it's okay, I just want to quickly speak to John's concern about it's not fast enough, and really validate that it is true that nothing is fast enough, because all of this work should have been done hundreds of years ago. But at the same time, when we were putting together this policy, we were really looking at only saying that we were committing to things that we knew we could make happen. And it doesn't mean that this is the only things that we are going to do. We did not want to commit to something that budget or time or anything else could take away from our ability to commit to. And we don't know. It is very easy to walk through the hallways and see who is represented, but we don't know yet if we'll have any money to replace those things. The Mill River Library does do an amazing job of putting out books throughout the year that are representative of a variety of historically marginalized groups. The Shrewsbury order for last year included a lot more representative materials. This is something that I know Wallingford has been pushing at for a couple years now, and I can say the same thing about Fred and Maureen. So it's not something that we haven't been doing. It's just I thought quantifiable goals collectively could help us really stay more focused on continuing to push that. And the reason it's 25% is because we have a lot of other things in our budget, if we can buy anything, that are really important. Like the DCF books, which also are becoming more and more representative. But there are other things that we do need to make sure we purchase. Sorry, I'm done talking.
And I actually, since we have looped back to the equity plan, Jody, I sent a response to Dave and the board about the equity plan, saying exactly what John said, that I did not think it moves fast enough. And I can forward it to you if you'd like to see it. 3 of the questions I asked, Tammy, is this an appropriate time to ask questions from my email?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. So a couple of things that basically, Jody, I would like to condense the 4-year plan into 1-year plan. I think we can do that. I'm confident we can do that. This is urgent. It's urgent work, and we're competent people. We have competent staff. I would like to ask that restorative justice and implicit bias training be front loaded so that we all get that training early in this upcoming year. We've been talking about this for a while, and I definitely want that training. I know my colleagues want that training. As far as money is concerned, I know there isn't money for PD, but teachers have to do relicensure work, and they can do self-directed relicensure work. And so I'd love for our building leaders, our principals, our administrators to put out to teachers, if you are planning on doing any self-directed curricular updating this summer, please work on, increasing representation in your content area. And again, this is work, self-directed work that can be used for relicensure credit. Let's see. I think, do you have plans to share the overlay tool with us anytime soon?
I am happy to. So, we generally don't share like that level of curricular materials with the board, which is why it hasn't come up before. But if it's something you'd like to see, like, happy to.
Yes, thank you. And then I think, yeah, that's it. Those were my questions. And I'm going to forward you the email that I wrote to Dave and the board in response to the equity plan, because this is urgent. It's critically urgent. People are dying. Basically the way I framed it was, if Breonna Taylor's mother said, what are you going to do about this? And made, let's say, the 4 requests that our student made, would we say, oh yes, we'll address all that in 4 years? No, we would not. So this is urgent now.
I definitely agree with you. I do want to make sure to clarify that we're not saying in 4 years we will address equity. We are saying
I know
these are the things we are doing, and this is our plan to sustain them over 4 years. Because if we just said this is what we're doing next year, then it's not about sustained systems change. I 100% agree with you on the importance of restorative practice. It is one of my great passions. To be completely candid, I want to make sure that it is done in a way that is sustained change. So when I joined the Mill River High School staff in 2010, creating a peer mediation team and integrating restorative practices with the help of Chris Dinnan were 2 of the first initiatives that I started. Those had really good success in the first few years. Some more staff got trained in restorative practices. We were able to use restorative practice instead of traditional punishment, both in school and in conjunction with the a couple things that got the courts involved. But that work doesn't currently exist anymore. And part of that was we weren't able to create, and I wasn't able to create, a strong enough base to keep that going. And so what I really learned from that is the importance of making sure that we are setting a really strong base up and that it's not dependent on 3 or 4 people. We have to be able to push forward so that we don't stop and start any of these initiatives, because they're all integrated and they're all so important to getting this work done. Now, I do agree with you that restorative practice needs to happen right away, but the bottom line is that we have so many release days. We have union-based contracts, and we don't know how much money we have yet. And my thinking, I thought it's much more important to get Rebecca Haslam from Seed the Way and Outright Vermont in next year, like right away, rather than me potentially leading something on restorative practices. And so it's all just about a balance of like, we need to do it right away. I agree with you. We need to push. This is the most that we thought that we could promise. And again, it doesn't mean it's all that we're going to do. It's the most we thought we could promise, already taking away from other things. And that's not to, because this is so important. But every single decision we make is based on limits. So if we spend money on this, then we have to take away money from something else. And if we spend time on one thing, then we have to take away from the other thing. Which is obviously.
Len.
Yeah, just to follow up on that with Jody, being a former administrator and trying to implement restorative practices, if you don't have particularly the teachers on board and understand how it works, it's very difficult for guidance counselors and administrators to run it effectively. Because if the teachers don't understand what it means and how it works, then when you don't do exactly what they want, whether it's suspend a student or in-school suspension or whatever it might be, now you're getting pushback, and they're basically saying, well, you're not doing anything, so I'm not going to report anything anymore. And so, and it falls apart. It falls apart. So I think it's critical, not just for the administrative piece, the administrator training, but the classroom teachers training, that they understand how it works, what the process is, because I've seen it work very successfully, but I've also seen it, Jody, as you said, fall apart when not everybody knows what's going on.
Okay, thank you, Len.
And I do really we brought this to you because we do want your feedback about things to push around. If there is something that the board wants us to look at as being more important in this list, we'll do everything we can.
Jody, again, with regard to any of the training that you're implementing with regard to this plan to staff and leadership team, if you could also at least offer it to board members at the same time, or invite them, or if it's possible to be recorded, because I know that with our board makeup, people are working and might not be able to be available during the daytime if that's when it's occurring, so they can view it. I know I personally would be very appreciative of that. Okay. Do you need anything specifically from us with regard to this? Or are you going to, as far as a consensus, or you're just looking for direction to present it? Do we need to take any board action, I guess is what I'm asking.
No, it's an administrative plan. Sorry, Dave.
No, it's okay.
I would ask Liz, I'd love to have your email so that I can just go through it for feedback. And if any other board member has any feedback that they didn't share tonight, please email it in.
And maybe just to address another one of Reese's points, is it possible that we can, I don't know if this is up on the website or would be up on the website, but if it's maybe we can, as we work on it, make what we're doing known to the public and to our community. I think that's really important, so people see what we are doing and what we plan to do. And, as we can attach timelines and dates to different things, I think that's also important too, so people know exactly or have a very good idea of what we're doing and can offer feedback or participate as appropriate in whatever we're doing.
Yeah, if I can jump in, Tammy. First, I want to acknowledge Reese. It takes a certain amount of courage and wisdom to craft statements like Reese did to send to the board and to send to me for consideration. And I'll tell you what, the board took wise and appropriate action in choosing to raise the flags. And I completely agree with the concept at the start of the school year when there's some real significance to that. And I'm grateful that we'll sort out process for that. We'll get that figured out with people working together. Just to address the other things that Reese brought up, which have already been touched on, but I just want to kind of acknowledge conceptually, she talked about the curricular side of things, which, as you've seen, is included in the planning that we have in place. She talked about developing an action plan, obviously, which is included, with the action plan. And as Jody said, and as you said, Tammy, we do have plans to make that plan public in the form of our website, as well as we have districts all over the state that ask us for our equity work and documentation. So we share our stuff with all of our colleagues for use. And then the restorative justice, restorative practices piece, as you know, is in progress. That's a part of the plan as well. So I just want to say that I'm grateful about the two actions that the board took tonight. I'm grateful for the feedback that you've offered, because ultimately we are looking for the board to acknowledge that, hey, we realize that administrators are developing a plan to execute board policy. That's really what this equity plan is about, is executing the policy that you created for us and putting out timelines, et cetera, which we will meet. So I'm grateful for all of that.
Great, thank you. So Dave, then, do you want to just segue right into and tell us what we can look forward to in the reopening in light of our existence under COVID-19 these days?
Sure, I will do my best. And to the board, yeah, go ahead.
Did you have something to say?
I want to back up that my original motion or suggestion that we raise some type of pride flag along with the Black Lives Matter flag, and it was recommended that I make a separate motion. So
okay, you're right. Thank you.
My motion, and I would defer to the ad hoc group to pick an appropriate flag.
I'll second that.
Great. Any discussion on that? And we'll do another roll vote if that works for everybody. So Adrian, you're up. All those in Andy's motion of raising an appropriate flag
I'm sorry, can I ask a question? Do we, and this is for educational purposes, do we want to stagger this? So I'm asking everybody this from the educational perspective. Do we want to stagger this since we're framing it educationally?
Well, let's get the motion on the table and seconded, and then, we can discuss, you mean like timing-wise? I'm sorry, who was that? I think maybe we just had maybe somebody else was talking. So does anyone want to?
Sorry about that, I raised my voice, sorry about that.
That's okay. Do we want to address it the same way we did the Black Lives Matter flag, and then just defer the timing and presentation of it to the committee that's going to task those people with deciding the process? Does that work for everybody? Do you want to, by consensus, do you want to just, okay, all right. Then, so we'll go through the roll call vote about raising the flag, a second flag, and that would be Adrian?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes, thank you, Andy.
Andy?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Okay. George?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Len?
Yes.
Liz?
Yes.
Maria?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So that was easy. Had I known, I would have just asked unanimous, but that's nice to see. Thank you all very much. Okay, so then we'll task the timing and process around the raising of that flag to the Jody and the group that she's going to organize to take care of that, so that it's most meaningful and appropriate timing-wise to, and has student involvement, etc. Thank you, Jody. You're taking on a lot. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So now, Dave, sorry, we'll move back on to COVID-19.
No problem. It's important work. I appreciate the board making those decisions and taking those actions. It's important. On to reopening schools after COVID-19. Before I get to that, a couple things I want to share. First, a thank you to Jody for the work on the equity pieces. I want to extend a thank you to the principals for all of their work. as we got through this year. I don't know if Helen's still on the meeting, but I want to extend my thanks to Helen for her diligence and focus and hard work through a unique year. And I'm just grateful for all of our folks, and I'm grateful for all of you. So I want to express that. Also would like to share, this is a quick aside, unrelated to reopening. We had reopened the retirement incentive window, and I just want to give you an update on that. Originally, we had 2 teachers slated to retire. We have had 1 additional teacher and 3 paraeducators, with 1 more contemplating, and I provided an extension to that person who's still contemplating some financial dynamics. So there were some folks who were interested in that extension. So I appreciate the board being amenable to us making that offer to folks. As we go on to looking at school reopening, you may not have had a chance to see this stuff, but today after lunchtime, I sent you a link to a 25-ish page document of guidance from the AOE and Department of Health. That's what we had been waiting on, that would have the firm details that I had promised you were coming. I put that link into the 60-something page draft plan that I shared with you. I put a link to that in there. But I think probably for the sake of our discussion now, more essential is a document that I shared with the board members this afternoon. It is called Copy of Essential Details. Basically what I tried to do is go through all of the statewide guidance and really distill out like what's the real stuff. And my hope is that this document serves a number of purposes. One, to inform you, right now about here's what we are going to have to expect for the fall. I would like to communicate with our parent and staff community tomorrow because I want people to be aware of these realities sooner rather than later. We all need to wrap our heads around what school is going to look like. And we know that there will be individuals that maybe make personal decisions based on that. Do I send my 3-year-old to pre-K that I was thinking about, or do I not want to do that right now? Do I go back to school as a teacher or paraeducator, or does this affect me in a certain way? There's decisions to be made. So I know that you can all read, but for the sake of just being thorough in our audience hearing it, I would like to touch on some of the key aspects of this document that I'm looking at. Again, this is the one that leads with essential details, safety and health guidance for reopening schools, and we will make this a part of the record of this meeting, so it will be accessible with board documents. So the first most important thing, everyone, students and staff members, will need to be health screened on a daily basis, and the language with that is at the first point of contact. So if you could imagine students who ride the bus, we will need to have additional personnel on board school buses that have PPE that can engage in asking students some specific questions about possible exposure, as well as take a temperature with a no contact thermometer. And we'll have to work all those protocols out. We've got orders in for those thermometers already, actually, because we saw that coming. Students that are not screened on the bus will need to be screened when they arrive at school. And that will involve utilizing a bunch of different entrances to all of our buildings to minimize wait time and get kids into school as quickly as possible. But there will be obvious impacts to that. And even when it comes to parents, so for example, a parent that's coming into a school building to either drop something off or pick someone up or what have you, we will be required to health screen those individuals, and they will need to be masked when they come into schools as well. By the way, it's important, I'll say it in this context and in any other way that I communicate about this publicly, this is not stuff we're making up. This is handed to us by the Agency of Ed and the Department of Health. These are the rules statewide. There are folks who will be very frustrated and challenged by this information, and that's understandable, but this is not unique to us in any way. John, are you saying yes, I will be very frustrated and challenged, or?
No, I'm agreeing with you. That a lot of what they put in there is taken almost verbatim from the CDC's guidance on opening schools.
John, that's so true, but I'll tell you what, I've struggled with that as I've listened to state officials in Vermont talk about how the CDC guidelines were not that detailed or not that thorough or not that specific, when you and I both know that a lot of that language came from there. So there's an interesting dynamic at play there. The second piece is a facial covering requirement. In really simple terms, all adults and students will be required to wear facial coverings. There are some exceptions for very, very young kids and students who, because of either health or social emotional dynamics, are unable to wear a mask. The guidance says that those decisions need to be made in consultation with physicians and health personnel at the school, and probably a little bit of administration or special ed if the cases fit with that. You may note that clear facial shields are listed as an option. I suspect that's an option many teachers may consider because, you know, teachers have concerns about the inability of students to see their faces and to, you know, read expressions and maybe even lip read in the case of someone who's hearing impaired. And I know John has experience in this realm. John, do you have something to add on that?
Well, I just want to make sure. So the governor, when he first started talking about face shields a couple of weeks ago, was not very clear, and some clarifications came out later that a face shield is not sufficient. A face shield must be worn with a mask as well.
Okay.
So I don't know if the Secretary of Education heard that particular announcement, but that is something that I urge you to clarify, because at least that was the guidance that was given for retail and manufacturing operations. We had to go through and tell a whole bunch of people at Vermont Country Store that they had to wear a mask as well as the shield. So that's something you really should clarify. I understand where they're talking about the clear mask when you're interacting with someone who is hard of hearing, who has to read lips. But I think that's going to be the exception to the rule.
Yeah, understood, John. Just for your information in terms of process, there was a large task force that I was not involved directly in, but I was on the periphery, but it involved a lot of educational field folks and medical field folks, like the head epidemiologist, Dr. Levine, a bunch of the names that you've heard in this whole process worked together on these guidelines. So I do know that the Department of Health folks had their hands in this as much as the AOE side did, for whatever that's worth. But clarity on that will be very necessary. I agree with you on that. Going to transportation dynamics, the biggest challenge for us there will be the number of students that we are allowed to put on board a school bus. Our early estimates with what they describe in terms of spacing is we'll be able to get about 12 students on board a bus. For those of you who've been around for a little while, you know that we used to have a multiple tiered system of bus routes where we had elementary routes and then middle school, high school routes. We consolidated those to conserve a number of areas. We're going to have to undo that work. I won't be shocked if we have to definitely create 2 tiers of busing, possibly even 3, depending on how the numbers shake out. But that will then potentially impact school start times. You know, there's a lot of dominoes that fall when you start messing around with numbers of bus stops and times. So we will have a lot to figure out there, and getting information from parents during the summer. Like historically what we do is we build bus routes based on who could ride the bus. We're going to need to build bus routes based on who plans to ride the bus, so that we're not wasting time and fuel and energy for folks that are not going to access that. If you go down to the parental family impacts, and you can see I tried to organize this just, you know, by what aspect of schooling it touches. The biggest piece here is, as a general rules, parents and guardians not permitted in school during the school day, with the exception of trips into the office for various things. You can see it does address early beginning of the school year with our youngest children or students that are having anxiety about the start of school, and having a little bit of accommodation and flexibility there. You can see that the guidance says that meetings need to be scheduled in advance. You know, the pop-ins to solve a problem or address something really won't be able to occur. Screenings will be a part, and facial coverings will be a part of any adults coming into the school. And the bottom line of people being encouraged to stay home when they're sick, and not you know, oh, they threw up this morning, let's see how they do. No, we're not going to do that. And we all know that happens, but we're not going to do that. Or they wake up with a fever, let's knock it down with Tylenol and see if they can make it through. We're not going to do that. We just won't be able to manage that appropriately. When it comes to like classrooms and like the structures of school, here's our bottom line. The grouping limits that are established by the state are set at 25 now. The problem with that for us is, including social distancing and the 6-foot piece, none of our classrooms in our district can manage 25 kids at 6 feet distance from each other. So just the logistics of space are going to force us into reduced numbers of students in any given classroom. And we are going to have to operate in the concept of, they talk about having kids stay in clusters or stay in pods, where we try to have students be as stationary as possible from a learner standpoint, and bring the teachers to the students as opposed to bringing the students to the teachers, just kind of flipping that model a little bit. Obviously, that's much easier at the elementary level because those groups of students are used to being clustered. It's much more complex at the middle school, high school level. We still don't know yet whether we can pull it off at the middle school, high school level with a model where every student is at school every day. We may have to go to a shift type of a system where students are at home one day, at school the next, alternating between the remote and in person. And that's what Tyler and his folks are going to be working hard to sort out this summer, based primarily on what we can manage from a classroom space standpoint. There's a lot of information in there about different spaces that will need to be closed down, not rewarding perfect attendance, not having systems in place that go against what we're trying to manage from a health standpoint. Maybe one of the more significant things in here, and I already had a conversation with Kristen Simonetti earlier today, the guidelines say that group activities like singing and wind instruments that can create aerosols should not be happening. And so what that means, if you think about like chorus as an example, is we might have history class able to function in an in-person type of setting, whereas chorus is probably going to still need to operate almost in the remote type of concept like we're doing now. Who knows how long that will be the case? That will be decided by the health data and the direction we're given from the state. But I had a preliminary conversation with Kristen earlier today, who's also connecting with the other music folks, because we know that will send shockwaves through our music and arts community. And we just want to be prepared to be thinking ahead about how that plays out. If you go to the school health impacts, just working further through, the biggest thing on the school health side, other than the fact that our nurses are going to be hustling relentlessly, it comes down to space. In each school, we are required not only to have a nurse's office, but also to have a separate isolation space where students or staff that are presenting with respiratory or COVID-like scenarios can be held until they are able to go home. There are some requirements for those spaces when it comes to ventilation and how we manage where they are and airflow and the like. If you think about a school like Shrewsbury, where our nurse station is the back third of a pseudo teacher's lounge type of a space, we won't be able to continue to do that. We'll have to adjust, what goes where so that we make sure that we're attending to things appropriately in that regard. But a lot of work to do on the health side, including the acquisition of the equipment and materials and PPE that we're going to need for our health staff as we go along. Looking at the public impacts, pretty significant stance that the state takes, which is that public can access school grounds, but public cannot access school building for any purposes, including using the restrooms, and that this applies for a school-based activity or a non-school activity. So for example, imagine I'm making this up, imagine a soccer game that is able to happen because the circumstances allow for it. With the guidelines we have right now, the spectators at that soccer game would not be allowed to go into the school building to utilize the facilities. Do I know how that works? I have no idea. Do I know if that can work? I have no idea. But that's the type of guidelines we're being given right now. And going a little bit further, school day, school year impacts. As regional superintendents, we are charged by statute with setting the regional school calendar around the tech center and then building our own local calendars around that. So we have committed to at least reviewing our calendar for 2021 to see what it's doing for us in terms of prep time, making sure that teachers have appropriate PD time, making sure that students have all the days that they're required to have by law, et cetera. I would say there's a chance we could have some calendar adjustments. If we do have calendar adjustments, sooner rather than later would be the key. And the bus route changes, et cetera, may cause a change in school start times, as I addressed previously as well. If you go to the big document, which I'm not asking you to do, but that big 60-pager, basically what that is that's our internal place where we're collecting all of our work around kind of the school structures and systems, around our instructional delivery model, around how we shut down again, if and when we have to go into a shutdown, including keeping board operations and business operations and facilities operations running. And then finally, the health side of things, which is all reflected in there. So it's where we are right now. If you ask me what's next, we have an internal administrative target of July 15th, so less than a month from today. I want to see our plans be rock solid for whatever August is going to look like. So administrators and I are going to be working to further refine this stuff. By then, my intention would be to keep the board informed all the way through. We don't have an official meeting scheduled in July, but I would just keep you in the loop and even keep bouncing some things past you as board members to maybe ask you to react to. But we really want to be set by mid-July so that things like school handbooks, communication, like we talked about earlier, Liz, there's going to be 50 things that we want to make sure that everybody understands. We want to have appropriate time to get everything out in front of folks and not be rushed at the last minute to start the school year. So that's where we are at the moment. I'll pause. I'd be happy to take any comments or questions. Andy, yes, sir.
Thank you. Wow, a great deal of work needs to be done. Being a finance committee person, I instantly start thinking about dollars and cents. I know that the federal government has a lot of the aid money was given to school districts specifically for COVID-related expenses. I would like, sometime in August, there must be a revised budget or an accounting of what we expect all of this to cost. And if we could see that and know if the money was coming from the federal aid or out of our own budget.
Yeah, great point, Andy. And the only response I can give you right now is just thinking around it. So at the moment, we actually haven't had a lot of direct COVID attributable expenses. We've had some, but we haven't had a significant amount. And that's based on how we designed our process when we went into the lockdown. As we're thinking about some of those federal funding streams that are coming in, you've probably heard of like CRF funds and ESSER funds. Those two pools of money have different regulations and rules around them. Some of those funds are going to be accessible until September of 22, which is my understanding. So as we look at those funds, when we find out what we're looking at, we're thinking, hey, if we have any COVID staff related needs, like let's say we need another person in the nursing realm to help with, tracking things and contact, et cetera, that some of those funds will be good to allocate towards that. What's called the CRF funds have a much shorter timeline on them. It's a December of 2020 time limit on those. So some of those we are preliminarily being asked to look at every possible thing that we can code as being CRF eligible to try to alleviate some pressure on the ed fund in districts across the state right now. To your point, by August, we should know how the legislature has solved, the ed fund issue, at least to the extent they're able to. We'll know more detail about the limitations on funding in terms of federal dollars that we have, and we'll have a better sense on whether we need to make any official or informal adjustments to our budget. So I think that's a good timeline that you bring up.
Anyone else? John.
So there were a couple things. I actually did take the time to wade through that 60-page document. And I know that some of those concepts were sort of thrown out the window with the other document that Secretary of Education sent out. But
yes,
one thing I did notice is that there were two different timelines as far as the amount of time someone has to stay home after their fever has subsided without medication. 72 hours, I think, was our plan, and I believe the state's was 24 or 48. I can't remember which. If you followed the link that they gave you to the information on sports, the verbiage around sports like soccer, they specifically mentioned that, basically precludes what we normally have as a club soccer season, which is tournaments, and allows exactly what you have in high school sports, which is one game at a time. So I think they are setting up for that. But I think the challenge that you're going to face is not only how are people going to use the facilities, but how are you going to only have 25 people, including the players on both teams, on that field, because that would be a group and it would need to be less than 25. So I think you're going to find that there aren't going to be any spectators at those events, because if you count up the number of kids on the field, you're just on the field, you're already at 22 plus officials plus everything else. And that's going to exceed the number. I also wanted to ask a question before I forget. You frequently mention well, at least in a few areas, that we may have to adjust the length of the school day. And I understand the concepts behind that and the reasoning behind that. I'm just wondering if you have any idea, and I know I'm putting you on the spot, of what that might look like in terms of start and end times, how those would need to be adjusted.
No idea yet, John, to be honest with you. I think our biggest driver, no pun intended, will be transportation. Once we get a sense on how that's going to shake out, we'll know what we're dealing with. You know, we've got a 7.5-hour staff day to work with. So depending on how much we can spread out students on screenings, right? How much can we expedite that process and get students into school? What are buses going to require? What's the whole thing going to look like? That'll be the driver. Obviously, we know that more instructional time translates to better learning and more learning, but I've got that 7.5-hour window to work in, and we'll just have to go around that. And you're absolutely right that my project for tomorrow is I was hustling just to get this one document to put in front of you tonight. Project for tomorrow is to go through and do all the cross-referencing and catch like that 72, 24-hour, 48-hour thing to make sure that we get the solid up-to-date details. It was 72 when we started that work. We just haven't caught up yet to where the guidance is. So thanks for pointing that out.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, thank you for that update, Dave. It's a lot of information. I think that the sooner we can make it, like out to the public so that everyone is aware of where, what we know when we know it, which has been the game. Sorry, Doug?
I think Doug has a question, I believe.
Sure. Go ahead, Doug.
Question. David, normally we deal the last month and a half or so with 8th grade students into dealing what their future will be in 9th, 10th, 11th, and senior year for classes. Have we done anything on that aspect?
Yes and no, Doug. So the school year had wrapped up, or well, when students went home, most of the scheduling for next year, from my understanding, was pretty much in place. Mill River had built schedules. Most students had been assigned to schedules, and we've got that if we are in normal circumstances. The challenge for Tyler and Jen will be if we find that we've got to adjust, numbers of kids that can be in classroom spaces, what their locations are. If we have to change that whole structure around to meet the guidelines, there are going to have to be some schedule shifts that occur. So that's to be determined. Another interesting thing that's worth you folks knowing about, maybe some of you have seen this in the news, driver's ed has been a little bit in limbo. And that seems to be resolving itself, but the limbo is, we had students that still needed to finish driver hours with Mr. Pluta in order to be equipped to get their licenses. And once we weren't able to do instruction, those kids were just stuck. And for any of you who've had teenage kids, you know that getting the exam at the DMV is not the easiest thing in the world to schedule and get taken care of. So it looks like I saw some preliminary guidance today that said that they are going to allow 3 individuals to be in a car with masks and with windows open, ideally. The premise of 3 individuals in a car is so that you don't have a single student and a single teacher alone in a car together.
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense to protect everyone. But some of those details are starting to land for us, finally.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be a driving student in the middle of February, I'll tell you that. Hopefully,
well put.
hopefully things will change to the point where if you have to make a change, you can put a student into something else that might be okay if you have not too many people. I always think that a Latin class is pretty good for anybody, but that's not going to happen. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
I'm
you,
just waiting
Doug.
for Mr. Pluta to advocate for getting like a Suburban as our driver's ed vehicle or something, so we could stack a whole lot more people in there.
And we can fix up that little yellow bus.
Right.
We could train future bus drivers there too at the same time.
There you go. Gary's dancing right now.
John, you had a question.
Well, just to Doug's question, as the parent of a, I'll use the term Reese did, rising 9th grader, we did get a couple of emails regarding schedules. One a couple of weeks ago, and I think one just maybe last week or early this week. So they definitely have it on their minds. I understand the new guidance for classroom sizes and social distancing may change that, but as one of those parents, I can tell you that the communications have already started. So As far as the driver's ed car, what we really need is just a Suburban with one of those rise up shields like they have in limos. Then you'd be able
That's
to
right.
have more people.
Well put. Right, good point.
Okay. I just want to circle back. It was brought to my attention that perhaps we weren't clear when we were discussing a recap of the equity plan process, that with regard to Reese's questions of the board. And so we've addressed the Black Lives Matters flag and voted on that. The curriculum is a work in progress by our educators, who are the appropriate people to do that. And we have indicated, I believe, as a group, that we would like them to move faster rather than slower in implementing whatever needs to be done to make our curriculum more equitable for all of our students. The action plan, which is the equity plan, will be made, the components of it will be made public. This way our community is aware of what we're doing. So that addresses number 3. And I believe that my take on, and my understanding, and anyone can correct me if I'm wrong, is that restorative justice is definitely a board priority, but we want to make sure that it's implemented properly, and that's not something we can throw together hastily. So we're going to, the board has indicated that it sees it as a priority, but it wants it to be done correctly. So just to clarify for Reese in her email so that she sees where we stand.
Can you also clarify for Liz? Thank you, everybody, for your patience. With respect, can I just understand a little better, please, the next steps for the equity plan? My understanding is that this is a discussion and input is being provided, and folks are going to regroup and maybe make some changes. So can I just get a clearer idea for next steps with regard to the action plan, the timeline to make it public, and implement, and the plan for restorative justice? Like a timeline or a plan? George is waving.
Yeah, so I guess, Liz, I'll respond quickly and then I'll defer to Jody on timeline for restorative justice. Our intent tonight was to get your feedback as a board. Our administrators, probably within the next week or so, will have a chance to review the feedback and make some adjustments internally. Most of that work will probably lie with Jody, Andrew, and myself, to be frank with you. And I suspect as soon as we have that in a place that we believe it effectively meets the objectives of the board equity policy, we'll get that public on the website and shared with our colleagues. I suspect that would happen inside of the next 2 weeks, would be my anticipation for how that will roll out. Jody, what's your response on the question of restorative justice timeframe?
So, obviously philosophically I'm fully in support of adding more restorative practice work sooner. I would wait for direction from Dave and from the board on what resources would be possible to do that, because we don't have, I am practiced enough within it to do that as an after school training. I could touch on it in leadership team. I could, talk with the leadership team about how to restructure discipline policy to be restorative and first. Those are 2 steps that I would feel comfortable taking. If we were going to overhaul the system, I really do think that a greater expert than I would be required. And I would have to have conversation with my colleagues about which professional development we would take away. And so, would it be the audit tool? I don't know. And so I guess to to wrap it up, Jody, fully in support of pushing that further, would love direction from the board and from my supervisors about resources and thinking about what that means.
Thank you, Jody. I think that that's important, because I think that we have to first know what, and we do not know. The great unknown is what the finance situation is going to be like. So, George, yes, I'm sorry, you're waving. Speak, please.
I want to chime in a minute in support of what Len said earlier. Unusual, Len, I'm going to agree with you that got to have all the adults in the system on board in practice with the restorative justice to have it work. not only do you have to have training, you have to have quite a few folks, the doubting Thomases, you might want to say, to see it working and see it working well. And that doesn't happen in a minute.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That clarifies things, Liz, right? Oh, Adrian, yes.
Of course, I waved my hand before I turned on my mic. Is it possible that we need a meeting, the second meeting in July to get caught up? I'm feeling like there's an awful lot that's going to be put off to August at this point. I know we aren't quite on the agenda there, but I just wanted to say it while I was thinking about it.
Okay, we'll touch on that when we get to the other legal business. But thank you for bringing that up. Okay, so we'll move on now to try and get to our committee reports so we can get back to that discussion. So first would be personnel. Len, do you have anything for us?
Yeah, I do. Hi there. I just wanted to let folks know Maria and I are beginning to work on a timeline to complete the evaluations questionnaires for the administration and district employees. And I'll be sending out an email to them, and I know some folks are still on. I'll be sending an email out tomorrow with a list of dates and times and ask them to let me know. I'm going to set about a half an hour aside for the interview process. I'm also going to send them a copy of the evaluation so they have an idea of what that looks like ahead of time. And then I'll make a schedule and we'll see how it goes from there.
Okay, great. Thank you. Do you have we don't have a meeting set, right? Not yet. First.
No.
Yeah,
no.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you. BJ is not with us for policy, but I don't believe that we had any policies that needed to be addressed, right, Dave? Yeah, okay.
No, we do not.
Negotiations. Anything, Adrian? No, she's shaking her head. John, buildings and grounds?
Yes, I think I would like to actually have a buildings and grounds meeting in July. It would be the 7th. I think there are a couple things that we can discuss, and also just get a sort of an in-person, well, relatively speaking, in-person update on what's going on with our buildings and our grounds. So I believe that would be July 7th, and I would propose our normal 6 o'clock time if that's amenable to everybody.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I'll work on an agenda with Anne and with Gary, and we'll get something sent out. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Community engagement, Maria.
Hi. So we did meet at the beginning of June, and we talked about the plan and the community engagement plan that the board approved at the last meeting. And we started talking about how that's going to look from the beginning of the year and how we might adjust that depending on how open houses get planned and how other school events at the beginning happen. So we're going to be meeting again on August 17th at 4 p.m. to talk more about that. And we're hopeful that we'll also be able to have finally our communications training PD for the board to happen in August.
Oh, yes, we were going to discuss that, right? That was, do you want to just submit that? You want to email everyone and see if we can figure out if everyone will be available for that date, that second meeting in August?
Sure. Can anyone just sort of raise their hand right now if the 19th of August, if you won't be around, if you won't be here? I don't. Maybe.
2. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, we'll email around then, and we'll see.
I was saying, hold on, I have to look at my calendar.
Okay.
Oh.
But still, I think that this one's important for all of us, really. And it's ideally about de-escalation and non-escalation. John, did you want to add something to that? You're still muted now. Okay.
All right, great, thank you. And then we'll move on to finance. So, Andy.
There. Okay. Payroll. I have 2 payrolls. The first is dated June 5th. Is for the amount of $562,970. Let's try that again. $562,097.45. The second payroll is dated June 16th, total of $4,522.59. And the total of those two payrolls is $566,620.04. That's the payroll. Let me go over to the pay orders. Expand that slightly. Pay orders, they are dated June 12th for the amount of $2,280,215.42. Dated June 12th, 2020, from the general fund for $5,883.71. Dated June 15th, from the general fund, $9,037.59. And dated June 15th, also from the general fund, $241,127. And the total for all of these is $2,536,263.72. I move the payroll and pay orders be approved as read.
Is there a second?
I will second.
Thank you, George. Any discussion?
Yes.
Well,
go ahead, George.
Yeah, I reviewed the documents earlier today, not as thoroughly as I normally do, but I didn't find any problems to be concerned about.
Thank
and
you.
I was able to look at the payroll without a problem. For some reason, my list of pay orders disappeared on the computer. Did I ever tell anybody that I hate computers? Just so you know. But yeah, I was fine with the payroll side of things.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other comments or discussion?
Yes, Tammy.
Sure.
Of that first pay order, which was over $2 million, of that amount, $2,038,000 was paid to People's United Bank. We paid back our annual line of credit, which we're required to do at least once a year. We do it in June. So that is why there's such a large amount there.
Yep.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification, Andy. Okay, all those in favor of approving the pay orders and payroll as read, please say aye. Thumbs up. Okay.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, it's unanimous. Thank you. Sure.
All right. Report from the Finance Committee, which met on Monday. At the meeting, I told the committee that this would be my last year on the Finance Committee and that Liz had talked to me about her interest in learning about the role of chair. I suggested to the committee several ways she and I could work together. The committee nominated her as chair and she has accepted. Liz and I will be working closely this year as she learns the details of the district's finances and duties of the chair. And so she will not be left wondering if she just got dumped into the deep end of the pool this evening. I'm giving the report for the Finance Committee. There we go. At that meeting on Monday afternoon, Stan reported that the district, as of mid-March, froze all of its spending, which greatly helped the district to end the fiscal year with a strong positive bounce. General Education Fund is underbalanced by $770,000. Special ed expenses, because they were exceeding the budget for a good portion of the year, they ended over budget, but just by $56,000. This year, we will end with a fund balance of $1.4 million. Stan presented information about the food vendors and the increase in breakfast and lunch prices, which we have now approved as a board, so you know about that. David reported that it appears the legislature and the administration are looking at how current expenses can be directly attributed to the added cost of operating schools during the pandemic, which we briefly discussed now. Federal aid can be used for those expenses, which in turn would free up state money more for the education fund. The committee, we did not set a date for our next meeting, agreeing it should be in late August. But if it needs to be earlier, Liz and I will see if there are important developments which the committee should review and discuss. And then we adjourned. Now for the financial update. Since our June 3rd board meeting, there's been very little upon which to report. The legislature continues to work on a budget just for the first quarter. As it stands now, the proposed state budget will fund school districts at 100% for the first quarter. As we noted in the update from Monday's Finance Committee, the district will end the fiscal year with a surplus, with the district's healthy balance sheet, $3.6 million line of credit, which the board approved at our last meeting, and what is appearing as full funding of state aid for the first quarter. The district will be in good financial shape through early fall. As I get to say at every meeting since the pandemic, we wait for further developments. There you go. Any questions?
Thank you, Andy.
Certainly.
Any questions? Hearing none. Okay.
I did want to say thank you to Andy. Sorry.
Yes.
Andy, you were a great chair. Liz, get on it.
Here, here, and here, here.
Liz and I will continue to work together. We'll be having a lot of conversations. I'll be passing all the information and knowledge on to her. She'll become good at this.
You have a great mentor, Liz. Andy's done a great job.
Agreed. Thank you. Thank you, Andy.
Okay, we'll move on now to George's favorite part of the meeting. My mouth's not working anymore. So George, any other legal business?
Yes, I have a quick question. Is Jody still with us?
Yes.
All right, good. As you know, from time to time, I try to mention individuals in our district that contribute a lot to our kids in our schools, and have it recorded in the minutes as kind of a thank you, I guess. And then this evening, I'd like to have that go to Jody and all of the work that she's done with equity and will be doing on the flag raising. And I think we need to give her a round of applause and have that mentioned in the minutes.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Mike.
I'm done.
Thank you. Do we want to discuss a July board meeting now? Do we want to shoot for a second meeting in July? Do we want to know that we'll have a meeting towards the end of July and leave that date a little flexible and make it a special meeting? What's the board's pleasure with regard to July meetings?
I'd like to suggest that we have a late July meeting and a single meeting in August, and then we aren't overburdening our summer selves, although no one's going on vacation anyway.
That's true. Do you want to stick with the July 16th date? John, go ahead.
Speak for yourself, Adrienne. I'm going to an island in Lake George in August.
Well, good for
That's
you.
the epitome of social distancing. You can't even see your neighbor from where I am.
Okay. Dave, what was your input?
Yeah, I was, well, maybe John just sunk that idea, but I was going to throw out, what about like a July, maybe 22nd meeting, toward the back end of the month, and then we could do an August, like either 12th or 19th, something like that, just still before school starts, but not too early, just for proposal.
I would tend to think that would be good, just because earlier in July might not address whatever we might need to address. Are you agreeing, Andy, or are you saying no? Okay. So why don't we right now aim for a July 22nd board meeting, and then we can discuss at that meeting what meeting in August, when we would meet in August, and depending upon what work lies before us. How does that sound? Is everybody good? Thumbs up? Okay. All right, we need agenda building. So I think from what I hear, we definitely need a COVID update at that July meeting with regard to reopening.
Yeah, by then we should have like our plan fully fleshed out and ready to roll. So good timing there.
Excellent. Another finance update, Andy and Liz, so that we know where we stand with Montpelier. If possible, Jody and team, maybe an update on the equity plan and the whole Black Lives Matter flag and other flag raising status. That would be good. Great. Is there anything else that we need that I'm missing that anyone's thinking of we need to address? Len.
Hopefully by that point we have the evaluation for David done. And so I might want to just have a moment to kind of go over that, probably obviously in executive session, but that's sort of my goal.
Okay, so we would have to, I'm assuming we'd still be meeting, well, according to the guidance from the state, we will be meeting virtually for a while until we move to a different level of opening. So we'd have to set up a separate executive session meeting, Ann and Dave. Okay, good. Anything else that we would need to address? Okay, hearing none, I think we did a lot of good work tonight, everybody. Thank you so much. And I want to thank Reese again for her comments and sending her email and her input. And thank everybody. And I will let you all go because it is now 8:54 and this was a long but very important meeting, I think. Have a good night, everybody. We'll adjourn by consensus. I assume I have a thumbs up on that adjournment, right? Okay. Good night, everybody. Bye-bye.